Today it costs $3.80, over 10 times as much. A gallon of milk cost $1.10. Today, $3.40, over 3 times as much. And a gallon of water. Now, this was funny. I couldn't find the price of a gallon of bottled drinking water in 1969 because people thought that was a silly idea. So the comparative I'm using, it was maybe a penny a thousand. So the cost of water, drinking water, is 10,000 times as high. So what is sustainability? 40 years from now, what will these cost? Energy, food, and water. And we have to think about those questions, and we have to work together to solve them. Politicians have deferred, for example, addressing global warming solution to the year 2050, comfortably after they will be out of office. We cannot afford to wait. We have to act now. We have to act together. We cannot defer that responsibility. That's why the Alliance for Sustainable Colorado exists. We'd like to have alliances in other states also come into being. We will help them with that, with their programs, with the building. We want to build where this tent is in the future, an expansion for the Alliance Center for a greater number of and diversity of groups and versatile event space where people from around the country can come together and meet here, centrally located airport. In closing, we can only win the game of life together when we all break the tape at the same time.
Okay. So this is a great
Solutions to large problems must be implemented together.
Okay, very good.
Look for partners because life is a team sport. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Ron Steef, the organizing director of Faith and Public Life. Ron?
Instead of my big binder.
Yeah. All right. Are we on? Yes. I want to say some gratitude to the Agape Choir that sang earlier. Thank you very much. And this is, I guess, the first official panel of the Big Tent. We're here. The convention is here. The Big Tent is here. Let's give ourselves a big applause for being here for this. Bobby, Mike, everybody here in Colorado, this ground crew has done an amazing job to get us ready for what I'm sure is going to be 3 days of an amazing program. For those of you who saw the faith panel yesterday, it was a big interfaith worship service that really launched the convention. It was over at the convention center. A couple thousand people were there. It was just unbelievable. It made a profound statement, I think, to everybody who's going to be at this convention, that we can bring all of ourselves, our whole selves, including our faith, to this work. Is that good news? That's very good news. Those with faith and those with no faith are standing arm in arm at this convention to pursue some of the most critical issues we faced in this nation and in this world. So I want to first of all thank the sponsors of this faith panel, which will be Faith in Public Life, which is the organization I'm with. I'm the organizing director of Faith in Public Life. We have Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good as our other sponsor. And then we have the Progressive Revival blog of BeliefNet. So let's thank our sponsors. Why are we here? Before I introduce our panelists, since they're not out here yet, why are we here? We are here because people of faith are embracing a broader agenda that prioritizes the compassion issues like poverty, like the environment, like human rights, racial and social justice, HIV/AIDS, global justice. People of faith are embracing a broader agenda. We're seeking common ground, and we're seeking some civil dialogue, a new dialogue on issues that have really divided this nation and kept us apart one from the other. So that's really why we're here. And those of us in the faith community who are going to be exploring this issue on this panel today like Faith in Public Life, for example, we've worked very hard to build bridges across the faith and the ideological spectrum. So there's a big tent here. There's also a big tent of folks out there who care about these issues. So for these big tent issues, these are some of the things we're going to explore with this morning's panel. The religious right really no longer, I mean, this is my sense. I don't know if others feel it. The religious right no longer controls the values debate in this country. Do others feel that? I really think that that's one of the premises that we're going to explore in this morning's panel, that the control over the values debate has also broadened to a much broader group. Now, it's not like we weren't all having that values debate. It's just that there's more recognition of a more progressive values debate that's coming from each of us in the media and in the political arena. A new movement is building. A common good strategy is building. It has religion and politics in the very forefront of this common good strategy. And since the 2004 presidential election, the ground really has shifted tremendously with evangelical Christian especially, and with Catholic and other religious voters. So that's some of what our panel is going to explore. I think it's going to be an exciting hour. Now on our panel, we will, and they'll be out in a minute, we'll have first of all our moderator, Amy Sullivan. Amy is a great friend of this movement. Here she is, Amy Sullivan. She is a national correspondent for Time magazine, author of the book The Party Faithful, How and Why Democrats Are Closing the God Gap. Her work has appeared in publications including the Boston Globe, Los Angeles Times, the New Republic, the Washington Post, and many other publications. Amy's really one of the leaders in taking a look at these trends that we're going to talk about today. Then also up here with me, we have Reverend Michael Beckwith, who you heard on the choir earlier and spoke. Thank you very much. He is the founder and spiritual director of Agape International Spiritual Center, founder and president of University of Transformational Leadership. He's got a very long resume, and I hope I hit some of the main points, but what I really picked off of that, and from knowing of the work that Michael does, is that Agape puts it into practice. They put it into practice. And whether it's feeding the homeless, supporting those who are incarcerated, advocating for schools, advocating for peace, advocating for the earth, sustainability, and really networking with religious leaders across the country, Agape really does it. Michael has been a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show and Larry King Live. We will try not to act like Larry King up here today, but we will try to really dig into your strengths. Author of A Manifesto for Peace. So thank you very much, Michael, for being here with us. Next out will be with Stephen Waldman. Stephen Waldman is the editor-in-chief of BeliefNet.com. BeliefNet.com, for those of you who don't read the blogging, it's one of the leading websites that tracks and resources faith issues. It hosts many of the top religious and political blogs. Stephen is also a columnist for the Wall Street Journal Online. So, Stephen, thank you very much for being with us. And then I think next up and last will be our good friend Alexia Kelly. Alexia Kelly is the co-founder or Alexia is the executive director. Here she is. And now we are out of chairs, actually, folks. We need one more chair. Yeah, somebody else is going to come on. So while we get that other chair, I'm going to introduce Alexia. She is the executive director and co-founder of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. This is an organization that really promotes the fullness of Catholic social justice tradition, works with media, does outreach, does strategic coordination with the U.S. Catholic social justice movement here in this country. Thank you very much. Alexia is a co-author with Chris Corzine of the recently published book, A Nation for All, How the Catholic Vision of the Common Good Can Save America from the Politics of Division. Now, doesn't that sound like a good book? Yes. Okay. Okay, and Barbara Marks Hubbard is here with us on the panel with the Foundation for Conscious Evolution. Has joined us today. Thank you very much, Barbara. And this last seat is reserved, and I hope he's still back there, is Zach Exley. Zach, another good friend, co-founder and president of the New Organizing Institute, writes on political campaigns for the Huffington Post, writes the blog, I love the name of this blog, this has got the best title of all the blogs up here, Revolution in Jesus Land. So writes the blog Revolution in Jesus Land about the rise of progressive evangelical Christians in America. So let's go. Let's get started with the panel. Thank you again for being here. Thanks to all of those of you who are watching this online. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Amy Sullivan.
Good morning. All right. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to get right into this because we have a lot of people and not a lot of time and a big topic to cover. But I'm also going to use my moderator's prerogative to say that if you really want to know the complete story of how we got to the point where people on the right and the left and in my profession in the media thought that you could only be religious if you were conservative, you really should read the story as written in my book. I tried to cover the entire, last 40 years of this. And it is a fascinating tale of how we got to this point because it does not match most of American history, where a lot of progressive religious voices have been involved in some leading political causes. But we'll just stipulate that covers the history. And I want to start here. We're just going to have a conversation instead of getting questions all the way down. But I want to start with Steve Waldman, who has really, particularly over the last 3 election cycles, been blogging. He was probably the first person to be blogging religion and politics at BeliefNet. And Steve, you have had a chance to see, both from the Democratic side, but also from where religious communities are, changes over particularly the last 8 years. And I just hoped you could tell us a little bit about what you've seen change and what the major trends have been.
Thanks. Can you hear okay? Is this better?
This is not working, this feedback.
Can you hear? Okay, good. Well, I was at the last convention, and I think there was one Faith Caucus meeting. It was kind of a sad little affair. And it was an unusual departure, and at the convention before that, there wasn't really anything like that. So this convention, which began with an interfaith service, has about a half a dozen different faith-related events, and most importantly, Barack Obama's campaign all year has been doing aggressive faith outreach. Obviously reflects a change in the party, in a welcoming of faith. There was, to me, the line from the last convention that was most telling was actually in John Kerry's acceptance speech, because it was such a carefully vetted speech. And he had a line in there where he said he welcomed people of faith. But it sounded like people of faith were some other group that he was welcoming in. In this convention, the statement is more, we are people of faith. And that's a big difference. I think some of this is a reflection of practical political realities that the party understands that in part this election is going to be, one of the key factors is going to be whether the Democrats can win over moderate Catholics and moderate evangelicals. And both of those critical voting blocks need to be addressed from a point of respect and with the party showing that it cares about people of faith, that can speak the language of faith, and that it is moving in their direction on certain issues. So the party is changing a little bit, reflecting, I think, what's going on in the spiritual landscape itself. And it's a big open question right now which way this goes. There's been kind of a de-alignment of evangelicals and moderate Catholics from the Republican Party. There's definitely an alienation, but they have not yet gone over and signed on with the Democrats. They're right in the middle right now, so it's a hugely important focus of the battle.
Well, Alexia, Catholics obviously are one of the biggest voting groups. In fact, you can tell us, but may be the largest religious bloc in the electorate. What is the Catholic vote? Can we talk about just a Catholic vote? And what is different this year in terms of what's really motivating Catholic voters when they're looking at the election?
Well, Catholics, they are a significant religious group within the electorate. They're a quarter of the electorate, 26%, and there are about 47 million potential Catholic voters, although only about 33 million voted in the last presidential election. But there's a huge change in Catholics. There are more swing Catholics this year than there have been in past presidential election years. 41% of Catholics right now are identifying as are not identifying with either political party. And that's an 11%, a big increase, 11% since 2004. So they're reflecting what many Catholic commentators have often said about Catholic voters, that they feel politically homeless, that neither party really addresses, both their social justice concerns. There's a deep social justice tradition within Catholicism, and Catholics, both modernist, John Green divides up the religious groups as modernists, centrists, and traditionalists, and Catholics across those categories are committed to the Catholic social justice tradition and issues. Healthcare, high percentages of Catholics across those categories support healthcare for all, a living wage. But they also care about some of the social issues, and you're seeing, I think we're seeing that reflected too in the electorate and in the Catholic vote this year.
Yeah, that's one of the questions people always have when the subject of Democratic outreach to Catholics comes up is, well, what about abortion? Isn't that just a stumbling block, and won't that prevent a lot of Catholic voters from supporting Democratic candidates?
Well, BeliefNet did a poll, and Michael, Stephen can say more about that, but we also did some research, a poll of Catholic voters in Pennsylvania, and then exit polling in 2006, and Catholics, for the most part, and this mirrors other religious voters, it's, close to 60, 70%, depending on how the question's phrased, really want a comprehensive root cause approach to the abortion issue. They want to see education, prevention, robust alternatives, healthcare, prenatal and postnatal support for pregnant women, economic support for families, robust alternatives like adoption. They really want to see that, and when you ask them whether a Republican candidate or a Democratic candidate, would you support a candidate that, and they give different choices, that is pro-life, that is pro-choice in those traditional categories, or, and it's the highest number, 74% of Catholics say they would support a candidate who brings people from all sides together across the issue to look for common ground and look for robust reduction and prevention of abortion with these kinds of alternatives and comprehensive approach. So very strong support for candidates who look to reduce and prevent abortion through this kind of supportive economic and socioeconomic supports. And I wanted to kind of mention that we're releasing a paper, Catholics in Alliance is releasing a research study on Wednesday that looks at 20 years of data and shows that economic and social supports are very effective, and in fact more effective than other kinds of approaches in reducing abortion in this country, and that we saw that in the decline in abortion in the 90s. So we'll be releasing that on Wednesday.
I want to bring in Zach for a minute here, because social issues have also been kind of assumed to be the driving issues for a lot of evangelical voters. And you've been traveling around and learning that those of us who call ourselves liberal evangelicals are not actually oxymorons, that there are evangelicals out there who are interested in progressive ideas and policies, but also that there's been some movement within the evangelical community. It's not as if we're discovering progressive evangelicals. It has been changing. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I recently, a few years ago actually, I kind of stumbled in from the secular left. I was raised a kind of militant atheist, and I kind of stumbled into the kind of evangelical, and I'll sort of define it, so you know who I'm talking about and who I'm not, sort of white evangelical, mostly sort of suburban, working class, middle class culture, and born again Christian culture. And I sort of married into it, so that's sort of how it started. And then I became sort of an accidental, anthropologist in this culture. And so while I still have my, objectivity and haven't been completely sucked in, I've been trying to I've been writing this blog, which is trying to be a kind of place for translating between the kind of secular left culture that I come out of and this born-again evangelical culture. So I was just shocked the first time I went into one of these megachurches, these evangelical conservative megachurch in North Carolina, and the sermon that the pastor was preaching was called "Two Fists in the Face of Revolution." And so it was all these preppy North Carolina, suburbanites with their collars turned up and their sundresses and their SUVs in the parking lot. And I was working for the Kerry campaign at the time, so I was like, the Spirit's going to call on somebody and they're going to identify me and I'm going to be torn limb from limb, And so I looked at the bulletin when everybody was singing their worship songs, and that were freaking me out, actually, and I looked at the bulletin and it said, "Two Fists in the Face of Empire, a sermon on Colossians." Like, what's going on here? And it was this like anti-imperialist sermon, an anti-materialist, anti-consumerist sermon. And these folks, it turns out that in that church, and so first of all, like Amy said, this has been going on for a long time. This has been there, this anti-capitalist, this get back to human beings, what makes us human, which is not the consumer culture, but which is something so much deeper and so much more beautiful. That's always been there, even when the church has been when those churches have been kind of obsessed with a couple single issues in the sort of public face that they put out there. But they've always been running the soup kitchen. They've always been inviting in homeless people and working with them. They've always, even these suburban conservative white churches have always been doing that. But now there's something new going on. There's, in the corner, usually the front corner, in some of the front rows, there's a little gaggle of, mostly young people, but not only young people, and they're reading books like Shane Claiborne's Irresistible Revolution or his new book, Jesus for President. They're reading Donald Miller books. He's the guy who's doing the prayer today here at the DNC. Reading Greg Boyd's books, Myth of a Christian Nation, for example. And they're also really intellectual. They're reading all this deep theology by Yoder and Harawas and like this really deep stuff. And some of these folks haven't even graduated from college. And they're just like super intellectual reading this heavy theology and becoming pacifists, getting an analysis of the culture, of capitalism, like I said. And that little group in a lot of these conservative churches has become the sort of driving dynamic culture within the church. And the people out of that group are becoming like the youth pastor and eventually becoming the pastor. And so I've found that, like, at least in my experience, that is where the heart and soul of this evangelical, Christian, born-again, white, suburban culture is. It's not all there yet. The bulk of the church is not really there. But those are the young people who are kind of driving the future of this movement, and it's having a huge effect.
What do you think the political impact of that might be this fall? Because as Steve said, particularly more among evangelicals than among Catholics, you're seeing some move in terms of political identification away from the Republican Party, but it's not necessarily being picked up by Democrats yet. We see a large number, particularly of under 35 evangelicals, are becoming political independents. But that still leaves up in the air the question of whether in November they'll come down on the side of John McCain, or whether the Obama campaign, which has really been doing certainly more outreach to evangelicals than any Democratic presidential campaign has ever done before, but really significant outreach even compared to the McCain campaign, whether that will pay off.
Well, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of folks I've met tons of folks who voted for Bush even in 2004 and who are going to vote for Obama this time. But there's an interesting subcurrent there, which is these folks are really becoming radicals, and in a lot of ways they have more, especially the young people, they have more in common with those anarchist protesters, on the other side of whatever wall is set up out there, than they do with folks at the convention in terms of their politics, because they really want to like smash the state. Well, no, they want to like love the state, out of existence, and it's actually, they say that, and they want to live the alternative into being. They want to live the kingdom of God into being and set an example. They want to be a people set apart, all this stuff from the Bible. And they actually really identify with the anarchist movement, and they hang out with secular anarchists, and they get together at festivals and stuff. So, and Shane Claiborne, he's a huge influence on this culture. He really advocates, well, no, I shouldn't say that. He doesn't advocate not voting, but he kind of just sucks every last ounce of excitement out of the idea of voting, and you know, is not going to endorse a candidate. So it's interesting, and I really think that there's another step, and like Jim Wallace is somebody who is trying to engage these young people on this issue. There's another step to take to like re-engage. They shouldn't come into the Democratic Party, you know, and be stooges of the Democratic Party or whatever. They shouldn't do that the way they did with the Republicans, and they know that, but they should get re-engaged, like, you know, in a way that they should keep loving their neighbor, but they should also, you know, love the state in a kind of active way to change it, I guess. Don't know how to say that, but yeah.
I certainly haven't run into any evangelical anarchists out there, but
I'll introduce you to
trust
some.
That
Yeah.
they exist. But I have noticed another political trend among younger evangelicals that may have an impact along the same lines that you're talking about, which is there's a movement towards, particularly in evangelical churches, towards more lay missionaries going out into the fields. You used to have just traditionally professional missionaries who would go out for several decades, and they'd come back and they'd show little slideshows, and we would, you know, see from a distance what was going on. But now you have, particularly at Christian colleges, kids going out on their spring breaks or over winter terms and seeing with their own eyes really the scope of the needs out there. And it's changed the way they think about the private versus the public sector. You know, a lot of older evangelicals I know would say, you know, it's not fair. People are always saying we don't care about the poor. It's not that we don't care about the poor. It's that we disagree with the idea that the government should be responsible for taking care of the poor. The younger evangelicals I talk to don't make that distinction. They say, well, the problems are so large. Mm-hmm. Nobody can really solve all of this on their own. Why would you count out government as a partner here? And that kind of shift, which may seem somewhat subtle, actually opens up for them the whole possibility of supporting more progressive policies, particularly to combat poverty.
Is this on? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I want to mention the whole phenomenon of the rise of a new constituency. It's been called cultural creatives. Paul Ray calls it political north, and they say that 25 to 30% of the American population, as well as in Europe and Japan, have shifted values already, but they haven't yet become a self-aware constituency. And I believe that this constituency is ultimately spirit-motivated action. And if you want to think of faith-based action, the root of faith-based action is inspiration. So who is doing all this good work? Whatever label they have, they're being motivated by spirit, and I'd like to expand faith-based to be faith in that deep motivation of people to do good, to help. And whatever label we call on it, I believe it's the biggest new constituency in the world. And it hasn't yet been quite identified, and I'll just say that we are here proposing a National Solutions Council to connect with Citizens Solutions Councils to identify what's working in America and communicate it as spirit-based social action. Thank you.
I wanted to pick up on this notion of government, the role of government. It's certainly in Catholic social teaching, and you see it across the board for Catholics, both traditionalist Catholics and all the way to modernist Catholics, that there's a strong support for the positive role of government, both kind of in our tradition and in Catholic support for healthcare, for example, and just a role of, and that government's role is to support the common good. And there's a clear understanding of the common good means in terms of government's role, that the government serves the public interest and not the privileged few. So there's strong support among Catholics of all kind of ideological persuasions, political persuasions, for a government that serves the common good. And there have been some interesting shifts just in the last 8 years on both the use of force. There was kind of a stronger support among Catholics for use of force to counter terrorism, but that's diminished significantly down to 43%. And also support for taxes when there are constructive uses like support for health care. There's a greater support for increasing taxes, for example, on those that can pay additional taxes. So, and just to echo Zach's comment on this kind of cultural critique, when Catholics are asked sort of what are the most challenging problems that our culture faces today, high numbers, 80% say it's excessive materialism, excessive individualism, this kind of greed and materialism that's really eroding our culture, and is in fact kind of a deeper problem that is the root of many of our other social ills, that this excessive individualism, which our Christian social tradition challenges with kind of a more communitarian ethic. I think that's an important point to note that reaches both across Catholic and evangelical voters.
That's a good point to make. Michael, you've been spending a lot of your time traveling around, talking to a lot of religious communities, a lot of religious folks. None of this can come as much of a surprise to you. So I guess I'm wondering why you think folks in my profession have missed it for so long.
Have missed the rise of the spiritual community?
Or the existence of religious progressives.
I don't know why you've missed it, but I know that representing the cultural creatives and representing the New Thought community, a lot of these individuals have been refugees from the other religions and have left a lot of that theology that they would call dogma, but they've maintained their spiritual connection to what they would call the presence of God or the presence of life within, and they became kind of disenfranchised from the political system. Now, I think because of the perils that are going on in the world, you know, you have environmental perils, you have war, things of this particular nature, they're re-engaged, but they're re-engaged from the place of wanting to work both and with the government and self-empowerment to do something in the world that's going to make a difference. Whereas before, they kind of left church and left government. Now they're coming back, having a greater awareness of what the Spirit means, re-engaging, and trying to make a difference by participating in the system, not necessarily tearing it down. A lot of people in the cultural creatives were probably, many of them were hippies, and many of them had left the system totally, are now coming back in, as I said earlier, primarily because a lot of the things that we're dealing with, they're serving as evolutionary triggers. It's like, if we don't deal with these issues now, something very bad is going to happen. And they don't trust that the individuals who have been running the government up to this point can really have the highest and best interest of all concerned at hand. So I think all of those are bringing people back to be engaged. This is my first time being at a convention like this. I was one of those individuals, but I was engaged with making a difference in the world, but I wasn't looking for government to assist. I was looking more to do something and let government catch up. You see, let government catch up with that. So I think a lot of people are now being involved, but we're coming with vision. We're coming with trying to synergize individuals that are doing good work to make things happen on this planet before it's too late.
Ron, we hear a lot about what Michael's talking about. People who say, you know, I'm spiritual but not religious. Jim Wallace likes to say that's the largest growing denomination in the country. And it certainly seems to be true when you look at poll results. You know, more and more people are less inclined to call themselves religious, to associate themselves, particularly, you know, even the label Christian or evangelical now seems to have a political connotation instead of a theological connotation for a lot of people. How hard does that make your job going out and organizing religious communities and religious people?
I don't think it makes my job hard at all. People are really hungering for their faith communities as organizations to be vehicles for change in this environment. I think that's the deepest hunger that I find in the organizing. And it's happened with Muslim, Jewish, Christians, you know, Catholic, evangelicals. People are willing to come together on this new premise. And I think as we talk about this era where we get out of the mode that I think the religious right really has put a lot of us in, where religion is about demonizing somebody for who they are or for what they stand for. As we start to dislodge ourselves in this country from that mode, people are coming together and they're finding each other, and they're not afraid to cross some of these lines. Maybe even some of these older evangelicals might start talking to some of the young anarchist evangelicals in their own pews. Who knows? But I think that's what's going to make, that is an organizer's dream, when people start to think about new possibilities for what can be done given the shifting environment. And I hope that everything that we hear here at this convention with the faith community and faith being an important part of the range of issues that will be talked about here, that people will be paying attention and will be thinking, you know, how can my faith community really plug into this as an organizing and activating agent in our community? Faith in public life does a lot of that around the country, and I'm telling you that hunger is there. People are on the move, and it's going to make it. It's going to make the changes, regardless of who's elected president. That we're going to be able to make those changes.
I think a lot of those lines are being crossed, not just with the infrastructure of Christendom, but between all the religions. They're crossing the lines not just within Christendom, but the young people are crossing the lines even between religions and are meeting on common ground as to the vision of what's possible on the planet. Just as the young hip-hop generation within their community obliterated racism. They don't really, that's not a part of their, just through the music. And I think that on the religious aspect, a lot of the young people are crossing all of those lines. You believe in God, I believe in God, what can we do together? That's beginning to happen now.
Yeah, and I'd like to say I think the whole tendency towards oppositional politics, oppositional religion, oppositional nation state is being transcended by the need for cooperation and co-creation for survival and thrival. So evolution is pushing us beyond oppositional politics and religion.
Okay, we're getting the sign that we need to wrap up, and this has been an incredible lightning round. So I'm going to give Alexia 30 seconds, and then I want to end with Steve and put him on the spot for what his advice would be for John McCain and Barack Obama to deal with
Thanks,
this changing
Amy.
environment.
I just want to give a quick plug. Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good works with the broad Catholic social justice movement. So we work with about 20 other organizations, Catholic social justice organizations, and we've all come together with a common, we did a convention for the common good in Philadelphia and developed a platform we are bringing to both political parties. So we work to challenge and transform both our political parties. And we created a joint website with all our organizations called VoteTheCommonGood.com, where we put all of our voter engagement education material up. So I just want to encourage you to check out that site. Our theme is Faith Can Move Mountains, Vote the Common Good. So thanks.
Steve, you get the last word.
My quick plug is for BeliefNet.com/progressive revival, which is the new blog where religious progressives can argue, discuss, and energize each other. There's really two different things. We're here at the Democratic Convention, and we've talked about religious communities, religious progressives energizing the party. There's a second part, which is religious progressives challenging the party. And I mention that because my advice to the Democratic Party is to have a new position on abortion. That's a great way to end, no explanation on that, but simply, simply the fact is from a purely tactical point of view, when you look at votes like Catholics and evangelicals, they agree with Barack Obama on 80% of the issues. The thing that is holding them up is they think he's an extremist on abortion. And Alexia's work on this and creating an abortion reduction agenda is, I think, one of the most important things going on in the party right now.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.